And what is up, everybody? Welcome back to episode 166 of the Designated Players Podcast. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Eli Lesser, commonly known in the social media world as This Week in MLS. How you doing, buddy?
I am so good. This has been a long time coming, and lists are my favorite things in the world. And I also love, crapping on terrible players. So this is going to be a very fun episode for sure. And thank you guys for having me.
Oh man, so happy to have you. Really excited because these lists are the ones we like to put in because I think there's a ton of variation that can go into it. Good discussion coming out of it. But as you hinted to, this is a top 10 episode, and we are outlining the top 10 worst designated players in MLS history. That's right. People have had their arguments. As Connor knows, we're probably only going to talk about 10 through 2 because we all know who number 1 is. We'll get to that. 337 players to date have donned the designated player tag. Some of them very, very good. Some of them not so much. So it's time to pick our worst of the worst. But before we do that, as we always do, it's Scarf of the Week time. Eli, I got to ask you, what are you rocking today?
Yeah, so I was just made aware of Scarf of the Week like 2 seconds before we got on here, so I wasn't too prepared. So I just picked up the first scarf I found, which is the LA Galaxy, my club's their city kit, the for LA kit this year. And it goes with it. It's great. I love the LA flag colors, so got to represent my city. So that's what I went with today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Is Galaxy your club?
Yes, very much so. I am not a plastic fan. I've been around for longer than 2018. And yes, that is why. I'm from LA. I got into the sport because of the Galaxy. So I am a Galaxy fan. People know that. So I don't have to hide it anymore.
Good, man. I appreciate that. You can see I've got my wall behind me, but the Galaxy are one of the teams I don't have. But what I like to do is, what I like to do is whoever I get, I like to get a scarf that represents their team. So it's now on the list. So looking forward to adding that one in. And hopefully, like I said, I think I'm pushing 60 or so now. So hopefully we can add another one in and rep it in a future episode. Connor, I'll throw it over to you then and see what you're rocking.
Yeah, well,
hold on before you go. Sorry, Connor. Before you go, we also have apparently Kid of the Week too. Eli, is that right?
Yeah, since we're talking about bad designated players, I had to pull out a jersey from one of the worst designated players who I actually left off my list, and I'll explain why later. But I have the man, the myth, the legend from the Colorado Rapids, formerly of my LA Galaxy, Kevin Cabral. I lost a challenge. I basically put on Twitter, hey, if Kevin Cabral scores against the Galaxy, I have to buy his Colorado kit, and he did. So, I wasn't going to buy any more jerseys, like literally ever. And, I bought Messi's World Cup jersey when he won it. And then I got Kevin Cabral, which is just, I don't know, symbolic in some sort of way. So I'm rocking the Kevin Cabral kit for today's podcast.
Connor, thoughts?
I didn't think you could upgrade on Messi World Cup kit, but I think you did it. I think you managed to upgrade on that.
That's what I'm saying.
Love that. Connor, it looks like you're rocking a scarf and a jersey of the week. Do they correlate, or is that a coincidence?
No, jersey of the week is because I was unprepared and just threw on a shirt. But scarf of the week actually is relevant. And considering I didn't want to start the yelling too early in the episode, let me just break out the Red Bull scarf because we know we're going to be talking about a certain Red Bull at some point.
I wonder who.
Just one. I've got that scarf sitting on my wall over there somewhere, but I didn't want to double up. I usually only bring out a scarf of the week, but there is a very special place in my heart for somebody we will be talking about later on in the day. It's not a great place in my heart. It's probably one of the worst places, but that's okay. I've got the hat, I've got the jacket, and I've got the original, my first ever scarf that I got when this person happened to be on the team. So if we're talking symbolism, we're going to break this out because this has lots of memories. I'm not going to describe the memories. All right. So I think we should talk, before we jump into the 10, we should talk criteria because it sounds like we may have some different ones. So for my list, I started by taking anybody who's still in the league out because I think they still have time to turn it around. It would be tough to call them a bust. For me, if they're still here, I then factored in price tag, time spent in the league, impact on the team during their time here. And I will just put it out there. This was very, very difficult because I really had to try hard not to just put every Red Bull designated player on the list because they've all hurt me in their own special way. So, Eli, what sort of criteria you rock?
Yeah, well, speaking of Red Bulls, I got to talk about my Israeli boy, Omer Damari, who was, one of your guys' DPs, and that fits my first criteria. And maybe the reason why I saved him off my list, because they had to be a designated player for more than one season for the club that they played on. That was the one thing I looked at. Then I looked at, they must have had some sort of expectations heading into them playing for the team. If they were a nobody and then they played like garbage, I'm going to talk about Kevin Cabral for this example. I don't think the expectations were ever really high for him, so I didn't consider him the worst, even though maybe play-wise he was the worst. And then my last one, which I just added, and I'll give another example, is how did the club take a huge loss on him, money-wise, or did they profit? Because originally I wanted to put Pity Martinez on my top 10, but they actually earned 1 million more than they got for him when they sold him. So technically he's not a bust by that standard. But in terms of what he was supposed to be for the club, he was. But I left him off my list because of that. Sorry if I just revealed like a bunch of players, but that was kind of who I thought of for each thing. But that was my criteria.
No, that's perfect. Omer Damari's biggest thing was getting a red card in one of like the 4 games he ever played for us, and then we sent him straight back home. Fantastic. Pity Martinez, the prime example of somehow Atlanta United swinging, missing, and still hitting a home run with their designated player signings. So, Connor, did you have anything different from ours?
So I tried to pull together like a bunch of data from when each of the players were in MLS. I tried to do it for all DPs, but I eventually quit on that because there are so many in history. So I've got some goals and assists per 90. And then I tried to find if there was a fee. Everything is in non-freedom units because I got it through transfer market. So it's in euros and not everybody had one. So it'll be a little tough to compare on some things, but yeah, I also took a look on the internet to see what other people were saying as well in articles, just to get a sense of like, what's the community think on worst DPs? And then I tried to like put together how often were guys like listed in people's lists. So it's just the culmination of a bunch of different things in there.
Nice. Well, you guys listening now have the criteria. You guys know exactly where our brains are at. Shall we start with some honorable mentions? People who were bad, but not bad enough. And if anybody wants to jump in, I'll just leave that open.
I mean, I have 30 honorable mentions. So I'll just name a few that I have in front of me, and maybe some of them are on your list. You don't have to react, but I did put Pity Martinez as a honorable mention. Emiliano Rigoni, Christian Coleman, Kevin Cabral, Stevie G, Brian Rodriguez, Angelo Rodriguez, Luis Amaria, Jonder Cadiz, Edison Flores, who I actually removed from my top 10 and added someone else instead of him, Gonzalo Verón, who you guys are familiar with, Innocent Emigara, just because he's a name that I just freaking loved, and then Lucas Cavallini from when he was on the Vancouver Whitecaps. But I didn't feel like they either were big enough names to put on, had the expectations, or maybe some of them are still trying to figure things out, like a Rigoni. Like, he's been terrible so far, but I'm not ready to write him off just yet. But that's that.
Mucho trabajo, Gonzalo Verón. What a guy. I miss him. Never got into Jesse's good books, but that's okay. That's okay. For me, I put Matthias Pellegrini on this list because I don't think he was given a fair shot when he got here. His massive price tag had high expectations, but that board ruined his chances. So definitely a bust on paper, but knowing the backstory, I think is tough. And this guy, Shergill McDonald from Chicago. He was just like in a string of really bad designated player signings, or like when it first hit. He played a whole season, only scored 4 times, and was shipped out to be like a replacement for somebody else. And he was one of those guys that was always on the list of like one of the worst ever, but I couldn't justify getting him in my top 10. So those are two for me.
Fair enough.
Speaking of Gonzalo Veron, I think that's the first DP I was ever exposed to, because that's the only person Andrew could ever talk about was Gonzalo Veron.
What a
but
guy.
yeah, a couple of honorable mentions for me. I have 5 on my list. I've got Claudio Reyna for Red Bull. I'm sure you've experienced that one all too much. Sean Maloney for Chicago. I put Jairo Torres right now on my Chicago honorable mentions, mainly because of the price tag and Chicago's, what's the right way to say this?
Lack of
refusal to
success.
play him. Then I've got Jefferson for SKC, and then the last one is a fan favorite here, Tomas Chacon for Minnesota.
I had him on one of my lists, but I cut him early because I felt like he just didn't have the expectations. But he had the hair. He had the hair to be a baller.
He did have the hair. Yeah, that's true.
He did not. Yeah. Sean Maloney. I missed that guy. He was
What-
here for
what
half
a
the season,
name.
but I liked him. But
Yeah, great name. All right, so I think let's jump into the top 10, and I'll let our guest go first. Eli, who do you got at number 10?
at number 10, I get one chance every episode to crap on LAFC. And my very first El Trafico experience happened to be the famous or infamous Andre Horta match. So I went with Andre Horta as my number 10. He was a young Portuguese rising star that they brought in from the Portuguese league. There were very high expectations for him. And, he actually had to join a pretty stacked midfield at the time with Lee Wynn, Benny Fahlhaber, and Mark Anthony Kay and Edward Atuesta, and he just never broke through. And then during this El Trafico match, he came off the bench and completely wiped away any shot of LAFC holding on to a 2-0 lead. And that is forever implemented into my mind. It was a great moment for me as a fan. And he was just such a flop for them. So I had to put Andre Horta at number 10.
Like that. I think that's a good
great
pick.
thing. Yeah.
I will hold off judgment because spoilers.
Andrew,
Connor?
didn't you say something about I never got around to watching it, or I haven't yet, but didn't you say there was something with him in the LAFC documentary?
Oh yeah, no, Bob. If I remember correctly, Bob Bradley basically came out and was like, in that documentary, was like, yeah, Andre just quite hasn't gotten up to speed, and the documentary goes behind the scenes and like it shows him just walking through training sessions and bad attitude, bad body language, things like that, which is why they cut him as quickly as they did. But yeah, he did not. It's almost like he thought he was above what they were doing there. At least that's a vibe I get from it. But
yeah, to add to that, I think he could have been what Ricky Puig is for the Galaxy. I think that's what they were hoping. He could be like that young guy that was, maybe making a weird move to come to MLS so young, but, he just really did not pan out. And I guess that's why. But yeah, that moment against the Galaxy will forever be in here.
Love it. Love it. Connor, who do you got at 10?
All right, so at number 10 for me, I've got Mustafa Jarju for Vancouver.
Okay.
What's so funny about that?
The name?
Yeah.
It's a great name.
It was a great name. I did not even think
Fantastic.
He had, from what my notes show, 449 minutes in 10 games. Just one season, I believe, in the league. No goals, no assists as an attacker. I could not find a fee, unfortunately, but he was included on, I think, 2 people's lists for worst DPs. So at least a few people definitely shared the sentiment as well. But I think just I can't remember exactly why he got on here, but I would assume it's mainly because of his lack of game time plus his lack of result when he was getting the limited amount of game time. But I'm sure you could tack that on to probably a bad Vancouver season in 2011. I can't remember exactly, but I just remember them being bad in the early 2010s.
Yeah, the notes I have here, it was a loan option that he got paid just about $400,000 in 2011. Make of that what you will, and didn't produce. So I tried relatively hard to stay away from players on loan because I just think it would be unfair. Like Omer Damari is another good example. He was on loan for like 2-3 months, right? So that would have been tough for me to put him on there. However, I made an exception at number 10 for a good friend of ours who I hope is listening one day, because he's very good at listening to our shows.
Not gonna listen now. Now that you put him on the worst DP list.
Oh no, he'll heavily enjoy this one. Our good friends at FCC did not get off to a hot start. They brought in a player on loan from Brighton with
Have him on my list.
with the 28th highest designated player salary in league history. His name is Jurgen Locadia, and I've got him at 10. Things were the reason I have him at 10 is because he did join during the COVID years. So it was a weird transition at the time. But 3 goals in 17 months of play, making the same amount of money as Josef Martinez, Robert Beric, and Nani. Probably should have gotten them a better return. Yes, FCC were a mess at the time, but he probably should have done a bit better there. Total package for this guy, about $1.21 million per goal, to put that in perspective. So, yeah, that's my number 10. He was a bit higher for me originally, but then I took into account when he got here, and that bumped him down a little bit. I gave him a bit of a break. But Adam, if you're listening, just know I'm always thinking of you, friend.
Very nice.
Yeah, that was good. He was an honorable mention. Then he went up to like 6, and then I'm like, we'll go 10. But I guess if we can move on to number 9, and I'll just jump in here really quick because I've got not much more to add at 9, because I've got Andre Horta at 9 from LAFC. Not uncommon for teams to swing and miss on a DP in their first year or two of existence, but this was like swing, miss, swing around, fall down type of bad.
Yeah.
£5.7 million transfer fee and a $1.23 million salary. You'd expect something a bit more from somebody coming out of the Benfica system. And again, he was less than enthused to be there. Poor effort level, complained about doing things when he was asked. Totaled 569 minutes over 16 games. Club sold him straight back to Braga. Not a great look. They did more than make up for it, though. Sorry, Eli. They've rebounded all right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but yes.
Yeah, jump on in at 9. Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
So I do have Locadia on my list. He's not my number 9. But I'm going with another big swing and miss of a striker for a newer club. And I'm going with Ake Loba of Nashville SC, who just recently was shipped out. Maybe a lot of people didn't have high expectations for him, but he was a club record signing. So I think that had to put him on the list for me, especially because, all Nashville needs right now to really be the favorite to win MLS Cup is a number 9 that could run with Hani Mukhtar. And Ake Loba literally has the profile to do that. He was supposed to be the guy. He was perfectly crafted to be the guy to run with at Hani Mukhtar's pace with him. And he just was so bad. And I know he was very young, and I personally didn't have that high expectations for him. But, just given the price tag, given what he was supposed to be, and given just knowing that he is literally what they needed and he just wasn't able to provide it, that's enough to put it on the top 10 for me. So Ake Loba.
I like that one. I think regardless of age or expectations for a club, if you got a $6 million transfer fee, you've got expectations whether people think of it or not. So I'm all for that one. I think that's a good one. Connor, what do you got?
All right, for me, number 9, I've got Nery Castillo for Chicago. Came over from Shakhtar Donetsk in 2010, 487 minutes, only 8 matches played in. I think it was only maybe half a season. It was another loan. He came in on loan. There was an option to make it permanent. Obviously, Chicago did not do that. What I will give Chicago credit for in this case was they took a shot. It looks like, according to his Wikipedia, he was actually the second youngest designated player in MLS history at that point. So I do credit Chicago with taking a shot there, doing something a little different as opposed to bringing in the 35-year-old guy that's winding down his career. But this one did not pan out. Fortunately, couldn't find a fee for his move as well. But he was also on a couple of people's lists for worst DP. So he ended up just getting on mine.
I will tell you the reason that he's on that list is because he was on loan. That's why there was no fee there. His
Yep.
salary was $1.3 million in 2000 and whatever time he signed for. So
2010. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
so
crazy.
think about those numbers. Like, yeah, they took a big swing. He was on my list originally, and I dropped him because he was on loan, and I felt it was a bit harsh. They didn't give him more time, but he was definitely in that conversation for me too. Yeah, 1.3 mil for 8 games is not a great look.
Yeah, I mean, these are guys that I probably would have considered had I, not had the criteria I gave myself. Because I went with had to be there for multiple seasons. But yeah, I mean, that is atrocious. I also kind of went with more guys that I really watched playing. I can't say I remember watching him play, but maybe because he didn't really play much. But yeah.
Yeah, we jump into we haven't watched any of them, but we're gonna talk about it like we do. That's what because we did stuff like this during COVID, and we kept it to like 2010 and on, and every comment was, oh, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? And we're like, the title literally says 2010 and on. Like they played in 1999. So it was good to open it up this time. But Eli, I'll ask you again. What do you got at 8?
Yeah, so speaking of players that I've seen play, players that I think everyone who's a soccer fan in this world has seen play. I originally did not have this person in my top 10 just because of the name factor. I thought, for an expansion team coming into the league, bringing in a name like this is good for, jersey sales and stuff. So I tried not to put too many of those guys in if they brought some sort of value, but I went with Andre Pirlo of NYCFC. I think of the 3 major names that NYCFC brought with Villa, Lampard, and Pirlo, I think Pirlo was the worst. I think he did not fit into MLS whatsoever. And, I got roasted the other day for, being worried about Sergio Busquets coming into the league. And I think of Pirlo as a guy as to why I'm worried about Busquets coming into the league. But maybe I hope Busquets proves me wrong because I loved him at Barca. But I went with Pirlo. I just think his type of game is just not for MLS, and that's just the harsh reality. And he was definitely not good for NYC. And I'm sure as a Red Bull fan, you're fine with me putting him on this.
I was about to say the only gripe I have is you didn't put him higher.
Okay,
but I will say I will say I am proud of myself. I did not take unnecessary shots at New York City players this year. I was respectful. I was good, and I stayed away from them, even though I probably should have put one on there. But I stayed away from them. I was trying to be respectful. But I know Connor's probably got all Orlando City players because he's an Atlanta fan, and I bet you've got one of
enough list to put on there. I think I have. Actually, do I have an Orlando player?
I don't think I do.
I don't, but I had a few on that I looked at. But
well, joke's on you, Andrew. Orlando's too irrelevant for me to put any of their DPs on here.
Clip it.
That's great.
Except right now. Now they're actually okay. But I can do my number 8 now if you want.
That is what. Yeah, that's more than okay.
All right. I'm gonna throw it back to a name that was mentioned earlier in the show, and a phenomenal name at that, might I add. So it's almost such a good name that I didn't want to put it on my list. But I'm going with Innocent Emagara at number 8.
My boy.
Came over, played for San Jose from 2015, 2016, 13 appearances, 611 minutes, 1 goal, 0 assists for an attacker. I think it was a free transfer, which definitely helped bump him down my list a little bit, but really poor attacking returns for someone that you bring in as a DP attacker.
Can I tell you the sole purpose why I didn't put him on my list?
Yeah.
Is a very niche reason. But I remember when he came to San Jose in FIFA 16, his card was cracked. I mean, he had the best FIFA card ever. He had 94 pace. It was just so fun to play with him. I didn't even care how bad he was on the field. And obviously he was atrocious, but because of his name and because of that FIFA card, I know FIFA doesn't equate to real life, and he's a great example of that. But that's why I didn't put him on. But Innocent Emigara, legend in my mind, for the worst reasons, but legend.
I withhold judgment for now.
Okay. Spoilers.
No, I won't tell you where he is, but I will give you my number 8 if that's what you'd like, Connor.
No, I wouldn't like it, but I guess we kind of have to.
See, I think you would like it because you're going to get to laugh at me.
Oh, boy.
At number
Okay.
8, I've gone with a recent one that I was very excited to come into the league just last year. It would not be on Eli's list because he did not last very long. A certain Mexican center back, not one that we'll be talking about later, but one that I had picked as newcomer of the year, defensive player of the year, basically every single new or defensive award that there could have been, I picked Carlos Salcedo for in his first year. Yeah, not great on my part, but we have in the podcast found that we are the curse givers. So anybody that we mentioned might be semi decent, career over. Kip Keller, I said was going to be a top 10 center back this year. He hasn't played since week 1 after giving the ball away to St. Louis. Yeah. Orlando, I picked number 1. Red Bull, I picked number 2. We can see how that's working. We're just not great at it. But anyways, yeah, I basically picked him as a guy to solve the world's problems for TFC at center back. He commanded a salary that was the top 13% of all players in my analyzed list, just to play 16 games, pick up 5 yellows, 1 straight red, get 1 clean sheet against a Canadian Soccer League side, and then ship 28 goals. Went home, homesick, missing family, didn't want to play in the United States, contract mutually terminated, bust on both ends. Sorry.
Yeah, so Salcedo, obviously because he played for 1 year as a designated player, I didn't put him on my list, but also I knew that wasn't going to work out. I know I don't want to be like, oh, I am such a saint, but like, first of all, I'm not too high on using DP spots on center backs unless they are, already like the best. Like I might give Miles Robinson a designated player spot for Atlanta, but that's because he has been so excellent for them. They got to earn that designated player spot, but with Salcedo, it's like I knew he was like a bench player at Tigres, so I wasn't, too fond of him coming back to the league as a designated player. But yeah, it was very unfortunate because, Toronto still is dealing with center back issues even after bringing Matt Hedges in. But
yeah, they're just a nightmare. We've talked about Bob Bradley earlier. We don't need to dive into it. I think everybody's got a similar thought about him right now. But yeah, that whole team needs a rebrand top to bottom. I guess Connor, I haven't had you go first, I don't think, for a place here. So why don't you start at 7?
All right. I mean, I think you guys covered my number 7 already pretty well, but I've got Andre Horta at number 7 for LAFC. The only thing that I will add to this conversation is that I have added a little calculation in my file. I call it fee per goal contribution. And if you had to take a guess on Andre Horta's, I'm assuming you would guess 0, but it's actually just an error because you can't divide by 0. That's how poor Andre Horta was.
Yep.
Fair enough.
I've got that sitting in there somewhere in my 300 data points by what, 15 columns. Yeah, I've got it somewhere.
Yeah, you gotta go touch some grass, buddy.
Hey, listen, I live in Alfred, New York. All right, we don't have a lot of grass to touch. Eli, what do you got at 7?
7. I tried, like I said, not to go with too many absolute massive names, but then looking at my top 7, I guess I have pretty big names here. But I went with the man who temporarily ruined his club. In terms of their designated player spots and all of that. And, the joke is he was listed as a non-designated player for quite some time. And then they found out he was a designated player. And I'm talking about Blaise Matuidi, of course, of Inter Miami, a man who temporarily ruined Inter Miami. I can't say he ruined them now that they're getting Messi and Busquets, and they're probably going to bend more rules, bend it like Beckham, quite literally. But I have Blaise Matuidi, he came into the league after winning the World Cup very recently before that. And, when Inter Miami was coming into the league, we were expecting all these big name signings that we're getting with Messi, and we get Blaise Matuidi and Gonzalo Higuain. Gonzalo, he warmed up on me and he became a guy that just didn't deserve to be on this list. But Blaise Matuidi never really brought anything to Inter Miami. And, I think because of that name value and the lack of success, and he wasn't a big enough name to where like his jerseys were all over the city. So I put him at my 7.
Nice. I took basically everybody from that early days Miami and just kind of tossed them to the side. I felt like that wasn't really their fault. Uh, Now Matuidi is a different story because he did get to play. He wasn't a Pellegrini type guy, but I just felt the vibe overall in that entire club was eh. So at 7, I went to RSL, a different one here. This one might have gone a bit lower. I went Jason Ramirez. So COVID era signing, which is why he's a bit lower. Young DP, so salary hit wasn't massive, but to me, there's this unknown transfer fee, and it had to be worthwhile because there was this whole signing saga that went along with it that I found out. So he played for Tachira FC, who had accepted a bid from a Greek league team. RSL came in, beat it at the deadline. So he came here instead. After all that drama, to me, the expectation is big impact. He made 10 first team appearances over 2 years, played 80 minutes. 8 minutes a game. Spent most of his time in USL, scored 0 goals, 0 assists, sent back to Venezuela in 22. So to me, because it's a COVID thing, I think it drops back, but I don't know how that doesn't constitute a massive bust for RSL. Maybe because it's a young DP during COVID, they get a little bit of a pass, but 80 minutes for somebody you had to steal from another club at the deadline, that just feels very underwhelming.
That's fair enough. He was a name that I honestly probably just glossed over as I was preparing for this because I didn't even have him on my honorable mentions. But now that I think of it, yeah, that makes sense. Maybe it was an expectations thing for me because he was a young DP. I try to give those guys some slack, but that makes sense.
Yeah. Like I said, if he had done if he had got triple digit minutes, I think it's a completely different story. But 2 years and 80 minutes for a guy you fought that hard for just feels kind of eh.
Yeah.
So that's 7 for me. I don't know if Connor has anything to say about it. He probably doesn't because he doesn't like talking to me.
I talk to you way too much. That's the problem.
You're not wrong.
No, I
Eli,
think. Oh no! Now you asked for my
you're right.
opinion.
I want to
and
cut. You were mean to me. You were mean to me. So now you get cut
That's
off.
fair. That's fair. Fine. You don't need to hear my opinion.
Besides, I'd much rather hear Eli's number 6 personally than whatever you have to say about me.
Yeah, number 6 was Jurgen Locadia for me. And it's you mentioned how he was as high as 6 for you. He is my 6, and I had very high expectations for him coming in. Sure, there was a COVID year, and I didn't really take that into consideration just because he was there for quite some time. He had a very high price tag. Wasn't it like 13 million or something? I'm just going off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers here.
The move for him, yeah, it was something around there. Yeah, it was close.
Yeah, that's a hefty price tag, especially for a quote unquote, kind of a smaller market team. And he was supposed to, take over that club. And like you mentioned, he was paid like a Joseph Martinez. And you expect, some sort of production from him. Maybe it was the players around him and he needed better players around him to help him. But, I feel like he scored one really good goal against the Red Bulls, no offense to you guys, and then dipped, So that's kind of what I think about. And he was a player that, I was very high on. I thought he was going to be like the best striker in the league, especially getting him at his age too, because he was like 25, 26 at the time. So that's why he's number 6 for me.
Yep, that's totally fair. Adam's smiling somewhere in DC. He's very happy with that
He's
one.
being validated right now.
He is. He's like, I was right. I said it. So the reason this is a joke, I guess we could fill people in for some of the newer listeners as we gain them in the Messi era. Back in season 1, we had done worst signings for each team, not necessarily designated players, but worst signings overall. FCC had been existent for 4 months. And he's like, Jurgen Locadia is the biggest bust in MLS history. We're like, dude, what are you talking about? And to this day, he's like, I told you. I'm like, we're not saying you're wrong, but you called it before he played more than 5 games. Like you got lucky. So he likes to live on that one there. I'll jump in at 6 here. I've got a bit of maybe a controversial one. I put Jermaine Defoe at 6 from TFC. So here's why. Toronto were in this mode. They're like, all right, we're going to get ourselves really good. We're going to start buying players. We got Michael Bradley in. We're looking at Jermaine Defoe. And then after that, of course, came Altidore and then Giovinco. But at this time, they were looking at the big name signings to make their team a bit better. They threw $6 million a year at him on the same level as David Beckham. And they paid a $9 million transfer fee, which, of course, that expectation from money alone expects you to be a top 5 player in history, not just the year that they got. His salary was 5th largest on the list that I looked at, and a top 10 transfer fee as well. His most famous moment at TFC was arguing with Gilberto over a free kick, once again versus Red Bull, throwing a tantrum, and then looking like a fool when Gilberto blasted it past Luis Robles. He was sent home to England after just 11 months, 21 games, 12 goals, and 3 assists. Now, those 12 goals save him from being in the top 5 for me because he did produce something. But for the price, top 5 price per game based on salary alone at $270,000 a game, as well as being top 20% in all attacking players for price per goal contribution at almost $400,000 per goal contribution. So for somebody whose total purchase package ranks top 10 in MLS history, it's a bust for me. Whether the whole thing was he needed to flip for Altidore and they wouldn't let Altidore go without whatever that whole backstory is, on paper, that's a bust for me.
You see, the reason why I disagree with you is because of the Altidore thing. They were able to flip him because my third point is, the profit. And in a way, although it wasn't a financial profit per se, it was, they got the guy that ended up helping them win MLS Cup. So I was a big Josie guy at the time. So that's why I didn't consider Defoe, but I get what you mean with the price per goal. Because that is pretty atrocious. But also, at least he hit double-digit goals. Most of the players on our lists, couldn't even get anywhere near that. They would dream of, getting 10 goals in MLS. So that's why I did not consider Defoe.
Yeah, like I said, I totally get where you're coming from that. Like, I saw the 12 goals, and originally I was going to put him as an honorable mention. But when I really looked at the fact that they paid $9 million and gave him $6 million a year, so $15 million for 1 year, and you gave me 12 goals, 3 assists, and then ran away, I don't know. I don't love it. If it happened at Red Bull, which it never will, because that money is never coming out of Red Bull Globe. But if it did, I'd be upset. So that's kind of where I went. Connor, what are your thoughts on?
So I'm going to sidetrack it for a second, but
of course you are.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I had thought that if the player was listed as a designated player, that their cap impact was kind of like preset, and that like even if they paid Jermaine Defoe like $6 million, he would have like the same cap impact as someone who's paid like $2 million. Is that right?
Yes. That is correct, but they're still paying the $6 million. It's not like they're saying, "Oh, we're going to give him $6 million," then he only gets 600,000 or whatever.
Okay, well, that's why I didn't consider really the salary part, just because the cap impact was kind of already preset. So I didn't really look into how much they were getting paid. So that's probably why I didn't consider Jermaine Defoe. Plus, to Eli's point before, he had double-digit goals, which I think if I added everybody on my top 10 list all together, they might get to like half of that.
Listen, I'm not saying he didn't have a bad year. I'm just saying for the price that you brought him in at, I don't think that he gave back what he should have given back. I accept that he might be able to go lower, but I think he needs to be on. But that's okay. That's okay. Connor, you must have somebody different at 6 then.
I do. And I'm going to complete the striker trifecta at number 6 by going with Ake Loba for Nashville.
Nice.
The fee was outrageous. 6.18 million euros, I believe. And only 3 goal contributions to show for. And to Eli's point before, I think he said it perfectly. This is a Nashville team where if Ake Loba plays to the ability of that fee, Nashville are probably running away with the Supporter Shield. Like, they're just dominant. This is like the one position they needed and they just haven't been able to figure out. And they took a shot on it, fair enough to them, but it missed hugely.
Yeah, agreed. That's why I had him on my list for sure.
I'm okay with it. I'm totally okay with it. He was an honorable mention, somebody who just missed out, but I think one of the reasons I also kind of disregarded, because when I made the list at the time, I don't know if he was officially off, because I know there was that whole thing like he was on loan, but he was still taking a DP slot. He might come back. So there's a little bit of confusion there. So that might be why he's not on mine. But yeah, I'm okay with it. I don't think it's a terrible shout. What I do want to know is what you guys think about my number 5, where I've put Denilson from FC Dallas, a former World Cup winner with Brazil, signed as the first designated player ever ahead of the 2007 season from Al Nasser, where everybody seems to be flocking to on these days. It was a massive move, arguably the best player from the 2002 World Cup team that won the World Cup, signing him into the league, fans around the country, expecting full crowds to see him play. And at 29 years old, too, it wasn't like he was coming over at 35. I mean, this dude was still ready to play. It wasn't a PR. I mean, it was a PR move, but he was expected to do things. They paid him to win games. And that was not necessarily the case. He played here just 6 months, played a total of 8 times, scored just 1 goal, 8 of a possible 24 points for FC Dallas. And it was a penalty, by the way. The goal.
Oh, we know how you feel about penalties.
Of course,
Connor knows. Yeah, Connor knows how I feel about penalties. We know he was being paid a record salary at the time of almost $900,000, which is 1.32 mil today. But at the time, it was $900K in 2007. His price per goal contribution was 20th highest of all attacking designated players and 8 times more than what FC Dallas paid anybody else in 2007, including the very dangerous defender Chris Gabondi, the eternal center back Drew Moore, USMNT standout Clarence Goodson, all of them better goal per price contribution than Denilson. He was signed for a late season push to the 2007 playoffs, which they did get to. They would go to KC. He'd sit the bench for 1 game, play 50 minutes in game 2. They would lose, and he would go. Head coach Steve Morrow basically said his salary was too high for what they were doing. So he moved on to Brazil to finish out his career.
Yes. So before we started recording, I told you that I was going to leave someone off that, most people would have very high off. And because of my criteria, it was Denilson. Nice. He is a lock on pretty much everyone's list. So I'm not surprised you had him. I just went with the had to be there for more than 1 season thing. So that's why he was not on my list. But, if I did do that, he would probably be top 3 even for me. Because, expectation versus reality. I mean, it's the Instagram special right there with Denilson.
Oh, 100%.
But yeah, so I can't argue with it. I just, don't have him on my list because of my criteria.
Yeah. I think the big thing for me was if it was a loan and it was like a half season loan, I said, okay, we'll forget about you. But if you were signed and then released or signed and not picked back up, then I was like, okay, you didn't earn it. That means you weren't good enough.
Yeah.
But he's clearly not at your 5. So who do you have at your 5?
At number 5. So this is a player who was a big name coming in, not Denilson level, but a very big name, Premier League legend. And this player actually was a flop of a DP for multiple clubs, which is very fun to think of. But I did Freddie Lundberg.
Nice.
Of Chicago Fire and Seattle Sounders fame. Well, really Arsenal fame. But, this is a guy that, great expectations coming in the league, him being Freddie Lundberg, and he was just garbage. So he really was not good in MLS. When I was first starting to watch MLS, I'm exposing how young I am, I guess. That was around the time he was in the league. And, even then for me, he was the laughing stock. And I just didn't, he was just never great for what he was supposed to be in MLS. And yeah, he was a bust for 2 different clubs, not just 1.
That's a great pick. He was on mine because once again, I think he was another 07 guy making 1.3 mil a year. So, thinking about things like that. But Connor, your thoughts on that? Do you know who that is, Connor?
Yes, I've heard of him before.
Connor didn't start watching till 2018. Is that right? You came in with Atlanta?
Yeah, whatever. I think it was 2017.
Might have been 17, right? Yeah. So we like to pick on him a little bit. That's okay.
Yes, I know who that is. And I think it makes complete sense that he's on your list just based off your criteria, especially like the expectations part of it. So that and plus the bonus part of being a flop for 2 teams. That's extra special.
I don't think I have anyone else. I mean, you could say Kevin Cabral's a flop for 2 teams, but I'm still holding on to a little bit of hope for him at Colorado. But very few players in MLS history have been flops for 2 teams, designated player wise. So I thought he'd be a fun addition, and I was kind of expecting you guys to have him. So I'm concerned maybe I'm too high on him as a terrible DP, but maybe you, Andrew, have him, because I see that smirk. But,
Maybe.
making me feel better about the pick for sure now.
All right, my number 5, right? Is that what we're up to?
That is what we're up to.
All right, I'm hitting home for you for this one, Andrew. Close to home.
Good. I love that. I love getting close to home.
I've got a one Frank Rost at number 5.
That's
I hope you
harsh.
got. Is it harsh?
I think it's harsh.
Harsh, like too low, or harsh that he's even on the list?
I think it's harsh he's even on the list, but go on.
Well, all right. Well, let's consider the fact that a goalkeeper DP is already a bit risky in and of itself. I think that's like, in my opinion, that might be more risky than even like a center back DP. But bringing in a 38-year-old goalkeeper DP, that's something. And he played, I think, 11 times. He had five clean, maybe 11 times. Actually, I've got 5 clean sheets in 11, which is actually not bad. But considering he had a 65% save percentage, I'm going to say that it was probably his defense in front of him bailing him out. And yeah, I just think that the idea of in and of itself of bringing in a 38-year-old goalkeeper DP, it basically automatically put him on my list. And
What year was this? I don't even remember him.
I believe it was 2011.
Yep,
Oh.
2011.
With my boy Tim Ream protecting his butt.
That's why he kept the 5 clean sheets. Duh.
Exactly.
That's right. So here's my counter to this. This was the year before my boy Luis Robles showed up. We had gone through 4 different goalkeepers for injury, inability to play, whatever, and we were at the time, I believe we were still making a push to get into the playoffs. So Frank Ross became available. Red Bull Global pulled some strings. We got him in kind of like an Omer Damari sort of signing loan type of thing, where there was no expectation for him to come in. They were going to pay him what they needed to pay him so that we can get into the playoffs and move on. We were flipping between Greg Sutton at 34 years old, Boona Time and Boona Kandul, who was good for a worldie and then good for an absolute shocker in the span of about 15 minutes. Chris Konopka, who I don't think actually made any appearances for us, but he was a lifer that jumped around, and 24-year-old Alex Horwath, who I don't think ever made an appearance for us either. So we didn't have any reliable options. We needed to bring somebody in. Luis Robles was still a year away, and Ryan Mera had not been drafted yet. So I think it's harsh because I don't think the expectation was there to go to Eli's criteria there. However, okay, like I'm not going to fight that hard with you because he wasn't great. Like, yeah, he had 5 clean sheets, but I mean, what did we do in MLS 2011 season other than how badly did we mess this up is the question, right? Did we bounce out? Was this the Houston year? This might have been the Houston year.
Were they what?
Oh no, this was Galaxy.
We won that year, but we beat
this was
Houston
Galaxy.
2011 and 2012.
Yeah.
But
this was Roy Miller penalty to David Beckham year. And then I believe Rafa Marquez got another red card in this one because why wouldn't he? Oh.
Yeah. But let's save that name.
No. Did I let that slip early? My bad. Yeah. So harsh. Yeah. Do I hate it? I'm indifferent. Go ahead.
Well,
I wish
didn't
you would
ask
have
for
put
your opinion, so that's okay.
Love it. All right. Here's what I am asking. I want you to tell me your number 4 then, since you're already out here.
All right. My number 4 from Toronto back in 2010. I've gone for Mista.
Okay.
9 games, 544 minutes. I believe was played at striker. No fee. It was a free transfer, I believe, but 0 goals and 1 assist. Pretty much for me, anytime you're bringing in a designated player striker, I mean, you're bringing him in to get goals. And when he comes in and scores 0 in his time here, automatically going to put him at least in the conversation for worst DPs. And I'm trying to look up I can't remember if there were like any expectations for him or if he came in at retirement time, but I do think I remember him having like some expectations. He was also included on a number of people's lists. I think he came up at least like 3 times. So I think it was like pretty widely consensus that his time here was definitely anything but good.
Fair enough.
Yeah, just under $1 million worth of salary there. So $1 million per goal, $500,000 per goal contribution, $1 million per red card. Fantastic stat. Love that. Yeah, I remember reading him too. He was more of an honorable mention for me. But yeah, Eli, who do you got it for?
Yeah, so this is a guy that is still currently playing with the team that they're on. Or obviously they're playing with the team that they're on. But so you mentioned this team earlier, how you wanted to give them some slack for their early ones, but they're still an early designated player from this club that has been dragging them down and has been a waste of a designated player spot for at least 3 seasons now. And he's a guy that I believe was signed to be that guy for this club. And I just always knew that he was never truly that guy. And, he was a national team player at the time of his signing. He was in some of the best form of his career at the time with his original club and the national team. And just he even scored this club's first ever goal. But, he's just aged terribly, aged like cheese. And I'm talking about Rodolfo Pizarro of Inter Miami. I think, yes, his first season with the club was, somewhat okay. But, he was meant to be that true creator, that true playmaker. But he was always supposed to be someone that, or he's always meant to be truly someone that, is a supporting cast. He's never supposed to be the star of his team, but he was placed into Inter Miami to be that guy. So the expectations were high. Honestly, anytime you sign a Mexican international, you're expecting jersey sales to come in and you're expecting them to be, the face of a franchise in a way. And for me, Rodolfo Pizarro has never been that guy. And, think about it. They had to send him out on loan because he was not good enough for them. And then they're bringing him back and we're just counting the days until he's bought out. So they can make room for Busquets or Jordi Alba. And I just think he's been a complete flop for me for Inter Miami. And, just thinking about how good he was heading into his Inter Miami career with Monterrey. And this was when he was a starter for the Mexican national team when, they were still respectable. He's my number 4.
Hey, Connor, weren't you the one who picked him as comeback player of the year this year?
This year?
No, that was me. Another one that I've ruined. Yeah, I had massive hopes for him coming back with Josef and Leo in front of him and all these players that can finally put the ball away for him. And he was going to come back from the loan in Mexico and be the guy. That's the reason they let Pozuelo go. That's the reason they did all this. Flop.
So thank you for justifying that. But yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like every year we're just waiting for him to kind of finally take off and be the player we've expected for him. And just every single time it doesn't work out. And I don't know if that's on Miami or if that's on him, or maybe it's a combination of both, but it's been so disappointing because I feel like his potential when he came in was huge. Like he was like, he could have been Miguel Almiron level with that potential that he was coming in with.
Yeah, I mean, he was coming in as like a 26-year-old in his prime. And, if you're the first number 10 in franchise history, that's also a bit of, expectation. But
yeah, he was supposed to be what Lucas Zelarayan was.
Yes.
For Inter Miami. They brought him in from the same league with the same play style, and they thought he was going to come in and blow the league apart. Swing and a miss. Yeah. So my number 4, we've talked about him already. I've got Innocent Emerraga at 4.
Fair enough.
So
he's a legend.
So yes, so the San Jose striker, a Swiss national team striker, joining from the Azerbaijan First Division. It's 10 goals in 26 games there. So scouting network, 100% there. Love that. Leave no stone unturned. signed him to a DP contract worth more than $1.13 million, looking for that last piece to bring them back up the table after finishing second to last in 2014. Big 25-year-old target striker in the Swiss national team at the time. Pair him up next to Wando, let Wando run in behind. He just holds it up, combines with maybe Matias Perez Garcia was there. I don't remember that time period, but anybody that you could combine with just to play him in, and Wando's going to go in and do what Wando does, right? It seemed like a great plan until it wasn't. Innocent, as he likes to be known, 2 years in San Jose, 14 games, 700 minutes, 1 goal, 0 assists. Salary puts him at 17th highest price per game in DP history to this day, which is the top 8%. This isn't in 2007. This is to this day. He is still in the top 8%. $1.13 million per goal is 8th all time among designated player attackers. In his time with the Quakes, he never made the playoffs, barely made it to the bench, let alone onto the field. 24 total months. Not the best way I would choose to spend $1 million personally. But yeah, that is just swing and a miss for me. I get why you have him a bit lower, but those numbers to me throw him massively up the table for me.
I get it. I just, because of that FIFA card, I'm holding on to that as my reasoning, as my justification for not putting him in my top 10. But no, I get it. He was awful. I mean, it's so funny because I remember playing with him in FIFA, but I don't think I ever remember watching him actually play for San Jose.
Right.
But yeah, I get it.
I will say once again, Adam is punching the air in celebration because once again, somebody's come in and made a decision based off a good FIFA card like he always used to. So he is living the dream right now. He's going to come in and shake your hand. He's going to find you and shake your hand, sir.
Let's go.
Oh man, Connor, I'm sorry. Did you give 4 already?
I did.
All over the place here. All right.
I did.
So Eli, I'm going to jump to you then for number 3.
Okay, I'm a little scared to talk about this one because I think I've built up a good rapport with you guys so far, and I think this is by far my most controversial take. Or maybe this person, I'm not going to say who, will agree, but this dude came into MLS with an unbelievable price tag. I don't even remember what it was, and you can't say this person necessarily was that bad on the field, and they're that bad of a player now. However, this person was supposed to change the way MLS is viewed around the world. And I'm talking about Ezequiel Barco.
I figured you were going that direction.
Love it.
Of Atlanta United. If you're being out, I think his price tag was like 18 million. I don't actually remember the numbers. But if you're coming in with that price tag, with that high of expectations, he was supposed to be like, I mean, everyone's labeled as the next Messi for Argentina, but he was truly labeled as one of those guys. He was supposed to change the way everyone views MLS, right? But then he was outplayed by a super draft pick, Julian Gressel, shout out to him because he's the GOAT. But he was outplayed by Julian Gressel, who they got for free. And, he was supposed to make an upward trajectory move after this and be sold for maybe twice as much as he was bought for. But now he's just at River Plate, which is obviously a great club, but he was supposed to go to Arsenal. He's supposed to be what Thiago Almada is going to be for Atlanta United. And it's just tough because, we always saw the ambition there with Atlanta United, which was always great. But Ezequiel Barco, to me, just never lived up to the hype. And that's why he's number 3 for me, although he did have a decent amount of goals, I think, at the end and assists. But for me, he just, in terms of hype level, he is the lowest for someone who just did not live up to that hype.
Love it. No notes.
Of course you love it.
I'm sorry, Connor, if you want to block me after that. But
I get where you're coming from because I remember in like 2018 when there were rumors swirling of him coming to MLS. It was massive. Like it was game changing, like you said. Like I'm going back to the FIFA argument again. I remember in FIFA his potential for career mode was outrageous. It was like
88. I remember that.
It was one of the highest in like the entire game, and this guy was coming to MLS. It was huge. I was so hyped when they were signing him. So I totally get it. He massively failed expectations. But I think his expectations were like through the roof. They were super high. And especially when you get to see what Thiago Almada is doing now, because like you said, Thiago Almada is what Barco should have been. But I guess for me, I think his last season for Atlanta was actually pretty solid. So I think he had good moments. So I kind of avoided going with him as opposed to like guys who just had 0 good moments in the league. But I do get where you're coming from. Absolutely.
And it's hard to put someone who did win MLS Cup with their club while they were a DP, but no one credits Atlanta winning that year because of him, but yeah, I just, because his expectations were that high and that was one of my criteria and they just did not profit off him like they should have. I think he is up there for me as the biggest flops, even though he's not that bad of a player. I would still take him. I mean, I would definitely take him on the Galaxy right now, but that's not really saying much. But, I just think in terms of that hype level and not meeting it and getting anywhere near it and taking a backwards move, even though River Plate is a big club, that's for me.
No, I get it. 100%.
I think the only person that gets credit for Atlanta winning that MLS Cup is Chris Armas and his awful tactics in the semifinal. But I'm not going to go down that. I'm not going to go down that road. Not today.
Here we go. The Red Bull tangent.
No.
You got to save the tangent because we're going to be talking about someone later.
I'm not going down that road. I promise you I'm not. We definitely can if you want to, but I won't. Connor, I want to know your 3.
All right. I've also got a somewhat controversial one at 3. I don't think it's controversial for him to be on the list, but I think it's controversial for him to be this high. But I'm going to stick by it. I've got Matthias Pellegrini at 3. Oh. I know it's very high. I get it. But I'm going to compare it to your Defoe shout. All right. So I didn't take into account salary because their cap was set. And I just looked at it from like a salary cap perspective. I get that they have to still pay them, but these are like billionaire owners. I'm sure they're not too upset about it. But Matthias Pellegrini was 8.18 million euro transfer fee according to Transfer Market, which is I think joint 16th most expensive all time. It's less than $1 million, I think, just under less than $1 million off of Defoe. And for his time with Miami, he had 1 goal, 2 assists. At least Defoe put up some numbers. He had 11 goals, 2 assists, something like that. Pellegrini did 12 and 3. Pellegrini had 1 and 2. He did nothing, and he was an attacker. I get that he's not going to bang in as many goals as Defoe as a striker, but he did nothing for them. And I'm not blaming him for being a DP because he shouldn't have been. I don't think that was on Miami's front office, but for the fee and for what he was able to do on the field, just in terms of his time at Miami, I thought it was extremely disappointing. I still think he has a future and could turn things around with NYC, but his time as a DP was, I think, a massive flop for me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't consider him just, because, I still think he can be that guy, and I felt bad for his situation in Miami, but definitely he hasn't aged well, especially with how Carranza has been for Philadelphia, because they were the 2 young guys that they signed at the time. But yeah, I didn't have Pellegrini, but I understand. I think he is a bit high, but that's okay.
It's definitely not okay. That's unacceptable, Connor. You took a guy who got
did
signed.
Not ask for your opinion.
You're getting it. You took a guy who got signed and basically was forced to play in USL because their owners who had the rules made for them. David Beckham had the rule made for him. He knows how it works, and he decided to disregard it completely to sign this guy, forced him to play in USL and only call him up every couple of times when he could, and then get hit with all this stuff and have to be sent out. I'm telling you, if that whole thing doesn't happen, Matthias Pellegrini's balling in Miami right now. You can put him on there at 10 or 9, and I'd be a little less offended, but 3 is absurd. It's just absurd.
It cost them almost 3 million euros per goal contribution for him.
How is that his fault, though?
That's him playing on the field. What do you mean?
He spent he had no time to get chemistry with his teammates. He spent the majority of
he had almost 1,000 minutes. He played in 19 games.
He played the majority of the time in USL. It's wrong. That's not cool.
He had 19 appearances.
All right, we are now officially Matthias Pellegrini defense podcast. You are
We are not.
ridiculous.
We are not a Matthias Pellegrini defense podcast. I'm not blaming him for being labeled as a designated player or like obviously he didn't pay the fee himself. I'm not saying that's like his fault. He got tagged with the fee, but like the fee is the fee. He can't separate himself from the fee.
I'm sorry. Let me. I should rephrase it. I'm sorry. He wasn't playing in USL. They loaned him back to Argentina. I mixed him up with somebody else. It might have been Carranza who was.
I think it was Carranza.
Yeah,
but...
that's my apology. But regardless, right? He played one season with them through COVID. It wasn't even like a real season. He played through the COVID year. Like how
so then him having 19 appearances through the COVID year means he played almost the entire season. So you can't say he didn't play.
No, he played 16 times for 750 minutes. Come on, tax boy, do the math.
It's not what I have.
I'm literally looking at transfer market right now. All
right, well, I looked on FBref.
Don't care.
You have to soccer.com.
I'm looking here right now. He played 2 full 90-minute games in the COVID year. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them where he played less than 15 minutes of his. So that is now 10 games where he played more than a half of a game.
Is this coming from the guy who put someone on his list who had 90 minutes in MLS? You put what? Didn't you put Ramirez on your list? He played 90 minutes in MLS.
He played 80 minutes over 10 games, but that's because he was signed.
Yeah, so then you're talking about like, oh, Matthias Pellegrini never like did these full 90s. This guy didn't even play full 90s his entire career in MLS.
Because he wasn't good enough to get full 90s. Matthias Pellegrini was, and he was left out of it because of the garbage signings that they made. If David Beckham is smarter than the average Bear, he doesn't do that. Matthias Pellegrini goes in, plays 90 minutes a game, and he's fine. And he's not at New York City. He's still playing at Miami. Him and Messi come in and score 50,000 goals next year, and he's fine. Again, I'm not saying that putting him on there is like totally wrong. Putting him at 3 is disgusting.
Well, I don't care what you think.
I love watching this. I love being the middleman here.
So it like I can tell based off of watching Eli's reaction, he does agree with me. Connor, you're wrong. You're terrible.
I'm going to put it this way. I am a very nice guy. I don't go after people too hard. So maybe I'm wrong for this. But I will say I lean more towards Andrew's take than Connor's.
Let's go.
But, to put it nicely, but I always try to find a voice of reason. I try to be a voice of reason for everyone. So I understand where you're coming from, Connor. But yeah, I would not have had him on my list entirely, but that's okay.
So to follow that, my number 3 is going to be a guy who played 6 times and got loaned out twice because we love a bit of irony. Thomas Chacon from Minnesota.
You criticize me. You put Thomas Chacon at number 3.
Did you have the numbers to back it up? Ready for this? Here we go. Like Horta, we're not surprised to see an expansion team swing and miss on a DP, but Chacon was next level. Signed as a young DP for $2 million after playing 20 games. 20 games. They signed him for $2 million at age 17. $413,000 a season over 2 years. They wanted to make an impact. At this time, Atlanta had signed Almiron, Barco, Yosef. Saw them all blow up. So this guy needed to be that next South American signing to stick. In his first year, which he was signed midway through, he bounced between the bench and reserves, making 2 total appearances, starting 1 being used as a sub. 2020 came, COVID hit. He made 4 more appearances, 1 start, 3 subs, never got more than 70 minutes in a game. He never appeared in the U.S. Open Cup, never in any playoff games. By April of 21, he was sent out on loan to Uruguay, where he'd stay till this day. $2 million for a guy to play 256 minutes, 6 games, 0 goals, 0 assists. The difference between this guy and Matthias Pellegrini is that he was still young and getting up to it. Matthias Pellegrini was never given the proper chance.
Let me shine some light for you. Matthias Pellegrini, 15 games played before they signed him. Even less than Chacon. And you know what age he was? 19. Even younger than Chacon.
2 years older.
Didn't you say 20?
17. He played 20 games. 17 years
Okay.
old.
Okay. So he's 2 years older. He's still 19.
Yep.
Still a teenager. And they paid 4 times the amount that they did for Chacon.
Okay.
And Chacon got 260 minutes. Yes, he was not good in them, but
right, he was terrible.
There wasn't even enough time to really say, like, could he have panned out?
So what you're telling me is that you're wrong.
No. I think you just immediately contradicted
You know
yourself.
what? I'm going to
That's just
say it
me.
now. I'm going to say you're both wrong. I don't think maybe young DPs like that should be considered the biggest flops if we're going off expectations, my criteria. Because I very much appreciate how you guys went for the number thing. Because I'm not a big numbers guy, so it's nice to hear these numbers out loud and be like, oh, you guys, that makes sense. I stuck with big picture players or bigger picture guys. But yeah, that's why I wouldn't consider Chacon or Pellegrini for this list. But I will say, objectively, Chacon is by far a worse player than Pellegrini. But I wouldn't have had either of them on my list, and I don't. But yes.
Well, basically what this confirms is that Connor, you're gone. Eli, new host of the Designated Players podcast. Welcome.
I'd love to come back and do more lists. This has been really fun.
So we have more lists. The other things I think you would enjoy that we do are kind of like games. So we just actually posted one about 2 hours ago for guessing a player based off of their career moves. And then we also do like tic-tac-toe stuff that I think you'd be really good at.
I'd love to. I'm always down to come back, but we can move on with this. But yeah.
All right, Connor, I will yell at you more later, but what I do want to hear from you.
I don't think you will yell at me later. I'll be honest with you.
Probably because you'll block me. But anyways, I do want to hear. I do want to hear your number 2.
I don't think you do want to hear it.
No. Here's the deal. I do, because if your number 1 is who I think it is, I'm okay.
Okay.
But I want to hear your 2. I have a feeling I know where it's going, but I want to hear it.
Okay. I think we can mend things, buddy. My number 2, Danielson for Dallas.
Okay.
I think you covered most of it already, but I think I'm actually kind of going and stepping on Eli's criteria a lot here. But the expectations, like you said, World Cup winner coming in where he wasn't like 80 million years old. I think the expectations were massively high. And to come in, play 600 minutes, get 1 goal, 0 assists as an attacker was massively disappointing. He was on tons of people's lists for worst DPs. So I think consensus is pretty widespread across the league. And I mean, I think you both kind of talked about him already, so I don't really have too much to add there. But yeah, I think he was a huge disappointment.
I'm okay with that. I don't know why you think I'd be upset with that. Now, if you
I don't think you'd be upset with that.
Now, if you messed up number 1, we're gonna have an issue.
Could you imagine?
But
I just didn't put this guy on my entire list.
Yeah, that'd be tough. Eli, I'll throw it over to you at your number 2.
Yeah, so I'd actually like to butt in here, and I'd actually like you to go first, because my number 2 is guaranteed to be your number 1's, but I have a personal vendetta against my number 1, so I had to put him number 1. So technically, my number 2 should be the objective number 1, but my subjective number 1 is a certain other player. So I'm gonna let you go first with number 2, so I'll leeway into your guys' number 1 with my number 2.
That's really funny because that's the exact reason that I was giving you number 2, so that I could lead way. But that's okay. That's okay. I'll go 2 here. So if 6 games in 2 years is bad, what is worse? How about 0 games in your entire time? At number 2, I have Anibal Chala from FC Dallas, a left back who was signed for $620,000 in 2017 from El Nacional as a young designated player. And I now agree with Eli. I agree that sometimes the young designated player thing needs to be taken into account, but this is a special occasion. He joined up with the team, and within the first few weeks of preseason, he got a hernia and needed surgery. Missed at least a month, and then the recovery took longer than expected. With Dallas fighting for a playoff spot, it was unlikely that Chala would ever get in the team. So midway through the 2017 season, sent back to Ecuador to get some fitness. While he was there, Dallas started planning all of these transfers like he didn't exist because he wasn't on their roster. So instead of taking him back and trying to get him in 2018, they kept him on loan again to keep that spot open. Then once the season was up, they saw very little future in this left back and sold him back to Kyoto for an undisclosed fee. So $620,000 transfer, $333,000 a year in salary, not paid by them while he was on loan, but that was the plan. 2 years straight of loan moves, 1 injury, 0 total games played for FC Dallas. It's got to be one of the biggest failed DP moves in MLS history. I mean, yeah, there was injuries and stuff put into it, but bringing him in for paying a fee and then never play, like 0 games, massively biggest fail.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. I considered putting this person as like one of my honorable mentions, but then I was like, I had 0 expectations for this guy. And maybe I don't remember. I honestly don't remember what my expectations were heading into it, but like looking back at him, I was like, when did I ever expect this guy to be a big player?
Mm-hmm.
And I really tried to stick with the big names, which segues into my number 2. I talked about the added weight and pressure of being a Mexican international coming into MLS and being a DP. And I'm actually not going to say anything else because I want you, Andrew, as a Red Bull fan, to talk about him and give your whole spiel about him. But yeah, I mean, Marquez, I mean, come on.
Yeah. How much time do you still have? Because I've got hours.
I don't have that much time, but I do need to run and get a package from my door. But I'm going to let you pop off while I do that. But all the reasons why I have Marquez at 2 is why you guys should have him at number 1. I just have a personal vendetta against my number 1. So
I love that.
I'll be right back.
Go on. You do that. Connor's heard.
While he does that, I have something to say for you. And I know you didn't ask for my opinion. I know you didn't ask. I know you don't care, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I feel like it's harsh to put Chala on the list at all, let alone at number 2. I get that it's a bad designated player move, but that's on the front office. The front office messed that up. They shouldn't have bought him. But he never played a single minute.
You're gonna blame front office on mine and then play ignorant and blissfully ignorant on Matthias Pellegrini? Not a shot. Not a shot are you getting away with that.
No. So the issue is that he never played a minute.
Backpedal on
he could have been the best left back in the entire league, but we wouldn't know. He never played a minute.
Matthias Pellegrini could have been the best left winger. We couldn't tell because he kept having to be loaned out because they had
1,000 minutes for them that season.
Oh,
he played 1,000 minutes.
This guy played 0. You're out of your mind. You are so out of pocket. I can't wait to come back to Long Island and beat you.
I get it. Dallas just took 620,000 and just burned it. I get that, but we don't even know how good he would be. He never played. I feel like it's harsh to judge a guy who's never played.
Unreal. You are awful. Like this is why I don't like you. I don't know why
we brought back the top 10s.
We have done 4 years of podcast and I have hated you more each and every episode. I don't know how we made it this far.
Well, now that I got you nice and riled up,
and here's the thing:
talk about number 1.
All of that, and I'm still going to be more pissed off about what I have to talk about for number 1, because none of my previous 9, or the other 240 or 330 designated players on the list match up to my number 1, who, as we know, is the consensus worst pick for MLS DP of all time, Metro and Red Bull's own Rafa Marquez. We've covered this before many times in early DP pod, but for our new listeners, here we go. After Red Bull saw designated player success with Thierry Henry and Juan Pablo Angel, they reached out to their friends at Barca for yet another one by the likes of Mexican center back Rafa Marquez. Red Bull Global at this point had not forgotten that we were their stepchild, so they were giving us money to spend on players, and they went and got Rafa Marquez and paid him $5 million a year for 2.5 years. The salary alone covers current Red Bull roster payments for like the last 6 years. You're looking at like $12.5 million that we just gave to one guy. But why is Rafa so terrible? If you bring up this name to any Red Bull fan or MLS fan for that matter, after they cringe at you with disgust, they will highlight one of many things. And I've gone to our friends at Metro Fanatic, who are no fans of his, and even have a list on their website, top 10 worst Rafa Marquez moments. And I will read you some of them right now. Breaking Shea Salinas' collarbone after body slamming him on a corner, earning a 3-game suspension. Watching multiple balls fly over his head, directly leading to goal, And instead of running back, standing there and pointing at somebody else saying it was your fault, the elitist mindset to think he was above playing at such a low level, to the point where he even gave a quote in an interview saying, I think this is a team game, and unfortunately, there isn't an equal level between my teammates and I. I'm actually focusing on the whole back line. I'm sorry, I'm actually focusing on my game. I'm focusing and performing at the highest performance at the highest level. That doesn't mean the whole back line can perform at the same level. That's the problem. He then threw a fit after losing to LA Galaxy in the 2012 Eastern Conference semifinals. Headbutt Landon Donovan, threw a ball at him. I'm sorry, no, that was a 2011 because 2012 is the worst day of my life. And I'm not going to go into play-by-play here. But as I've told many a guest who have been here to listen to my rant, this was the first time I've ever felt pain at a sporting event. I wasn't there, but I was watching it. This is the first time I've ever swore in front of my father. At this point, I was 15. Yeah, 12, 14, 15. So first time I ever swore in front of my father. And just the first time I've ever felt like a team has let me down, and I've been here ever since. So that's great. Here's basically what happened. In 2012, Red Bull played rivals DC United in the Eastern Conference semifinals. We were awarded a penalty kick after Kenny Cooper was taken down by Bill Hamid, led to a straight red card. We scored. Mark Geiger needed to be the center of attention, wanted all the cameras on him. He made us retake it, and we missed. However, we're still up a man with 30 minutes to go. Great, awesome. We're feeling great. 10 minutes later, Rafa Marquez goes into the single dumbest challenge I've ever seen in my life, sliding in on, I believe, Chris Pontius. About 4 seconds after he's given the ball away, takes him out while he's already on a yellow, gets himself sent off, loses our man advantage. DC United go on to score, and whatever, Metro lose. We've been here, done that, right? That is just the memory of all of these lists that I've got here. You see bad DPs in this league sometimes. You see DPs who think that they are better than what they are playing with. You see DPs that are lazy and don't want to work. But never has there ever been the perfect combination of all three, except for one. Rafa Marquez, the single worst designated player signing of all time. Drop the mic.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with, on an objective basis, he is by far number one. I'll get to my subjective first or later, but Connor, if you want to, add anything to that, I'm assuming that's who you have at number one.
It is who I have at number one, but I don't really think I can add anything else to that. Not that I haven't heard that speech before. I think I've heard it a number of times at this point. But
Connor's smart enough to know I don't like him, but he knows that if he messed that up by the time I got back to Long Island later next week, he'd be in for it. So smart man.
Yeah. I think he would actually go solo on the podcast if I didn't put Rafa Marquez number one.
I would start recording things, just not tell you, and be like, "Oh, have you prepped this episode yet? Sorry, we've already recorded it." All right, Eli, who do you got? You're as an LA fan. Can I take a guess?
You know who it is.
I feel like I don't. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Go ahead.
So it's embarrassing for me right now because this player is actually technically in the best form of his MLS career. So it's a little awkward with that, awkward timing. However, I always make these videos saying these players are flops and then they prove me wrong. And I do an apology video saying they've proved me wrong. But this guy, it's going to take a lot. He's going to have to go double-digit goals and assists this year to give me that. And I'm throwing away all of my criteria for this player because some would say, even despite him being a massive name, expectations weren't that high based on, his previous club that he was with and what he did for them. So expectations weren't high, but this is a signing the Galaxy should have never made, ever. Douglas Costa, like, what are you doing? I mean, Taylor Twellman, that stuff. This is a player that came in, thinks he's above the league. Like you mentioned with Rafa Marquez, I wouldn't say to the extent of Rafa Marquez, but this is a guy that when he knows that he has a vacation planned for next week, he gets himself red carded in the very last minute. It happened last year when he did against Minnesota. And what happened was, he got this big suspension for, taking a guy down with like 10 seconds left in the match, right? And then next weekend, he's posted this beautiful Airbnb getaway, which he had to. Those are the type of Airbnbs you got to schedule like a year in advance. He knew that he had to miss that next game. And then this very same season, he does the same exact thing the weekend before the LA Galaxy have their most embarrassing performance in franchise history, which, you know, the fans kind of wanted, against LAFC, because he knew that Coachella was the next weekend, so he needed to go. He had that VIP pass, we already know. Douglas Costa was the biggest waste. When the team needs him most, and he knows that the team needs him most, then he's just never there. He doesn't care. And you know what's even more effed up? I know Galaxy family members of players that struggle to get seats, yet Douglas Costa's wife gets a suite all to herself at Dignity Health Sports Park because he's a designated player. And does that have to do with on the field? No, but it just tells you like the type of guy he is, the type of person he is, what he's here in MLS to accomplish, which is just to collect a paycheck, to be a fat, lazy bastard. And it sucks because he's actually playing pretty well right now, and I got to give him a little credit for that. But either way, he's going to have to do so much to earn my respect. And I didn't even mention the fact that he has an arrest warrant right now in Brazil because he is a terrible father. He hasn't paid his child support. And, you know, the second he steps back in Brazil, he's going to prison. So I get that Rafa Marquez is the number one objectively, but subjectively, I've never hated a soccer player more than I hate Douglas Costa. And I had to put him at number one. When you told me this was the list we were doing, I didn't even think about it. He was number one for me. And, you know, in an era of terrible flops, especially for DPs for the Galaxy, to me, he is the absolute pinnacle that shows this front office has no idea what it's doing. And it's the part of the reason why I was so Klein out. Everyone was so Klein out with the Galaxy. It's signings like this that have made us the laughing stock of the league. And yeah, Douglas Costa, number one for me.
I will tell you, the second that he leaves MLS, whether it be retire or move, number two. I will never displace Rafa Marquez at one, but number two, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, we talked about it when they signed him. Like, we're out here trying to shed, and we don't really need to shed it because we've never been a retirement league, but we're trying to shred that whole thing. And he shows up and is acting like this, and it doesn't do well for us. It's the same thing with, you know, Insigne and Bernardeschi coming out and talking negatively about what's going on here. And I'm not saying you have to love every minute of here, but you're a professional. You know, you're trying to help what we're doing here as a unit, as a collective. And Douglas Costa just said, "Screw it. I'm gonna do whatever I want to do and move on with my life." And completely agree with where you're at there, my friend.
Also, to add on to it, because I just thought about it, he talked about wanting to go back to Gremio because he wanted to get redemption with the fan base when he needs to redeem himself to the Galaxy fan base. It's just so ridiculous, the stuff that comes out of this dude's mouth. And I don't want to talk about people that I've talked to, but everyone that I know at the club is like, we don't even care about him. Like, he is just so irrelevant to us because he's so awful to us. He treats us poorly. He's just not a great presence. And we know that he's there to collect a paycheck. And the Galaxy desperately need wingers. They need their wingers to produce. And, you know, he's producing well, at least within the last few weeks. But before then, I mean, this man, and, you know, he had a 4 to 6 week injury and he didn't get injured. He just had a broken ego and hurt feelings. That's what he was out with. So I don't get it. Why this dude's still here. Everyone's dying for him to be bought out, but the Galaxy are in a situation where they literally can't afford to buy anyone out because they can't replace him. So, yeah, Douglas Costa for me, number one. Rafa Marquez, you know, everyone knows he's number one, but, you know, I got to be subjective with this.
I'm all for it. I'm here for it. And even if I were to take players who were already in the league, he'd be up for sure. Connor, you want to add anything onto that?
I know you keep saying it's like your subjective number one, but the more you keep talking about it, I feel like the better the case you're making for him to actually be like a number one spot in this list. I feel you're persuading me more and more every time you talk about it.
I have stories beyond stories about this guy, and I'm so glad I don't have to be in a locker room with him. That's for sure. And I'm so glad that I'm not, a family member of another player. Because like I said, Galaxy are really good at giving away seats to people. And, a lot of players' moms and families just can't even get seats and can't even fit into the player suite, because there's a player suite and then there's the Douglas Costa wife suite by herself. It's ridiculous.
So bad. That is
Chicharito also has his own suite, but poor Chicharito with the injury. We love him. We love him.
And he came out very much like David Villa did for New York City. And yeah, he played at the highest level all over the world and was a big star. He does not quit. This guy is not one of those Andrea Pirlo type of walk around and whatever happens. This dude, Chicharito, fights, man. I love watching him play. The same way I loved watching David Villa play as a Red Bull fan. I was like, man, it's good to see somebody show up and actually fight, because that's what we're looking for. So, he can get a pass. Douglas Costa, not so much. That's our list. Please, anybody listening, let us know how bad Connor messed his up. Give credit to Eli for a great list. Always praise me. Connor, you can say whatever you want about him. But before we do run, Eli, we want to give you this time. Take a little bit of however much time you'd like and tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, very easy. This Week in MLS on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you want to follow me on one platform, I'd prefer it to be Instagram. That's the only one I actually care about. I don't really like Twitter at all because people are mean to me, but
They're
that's
so
okay. But TikTok, whatever. I don't know if a lot of people listening to this would be like at the TikTok people. But Instagram, if you have an Instagram, follow me. I show a lot of care to my followers there. So I would, that's that. And also this was just really fun. So shout out to you guys. Make sure if you're listening out there, you're probably already subscribed to these guys, but I love doing lists like this. So if you ever want me to come back, I would be more than happy to do another list.
Oh, 100%. I will say
100.
Top MLS content creator out there is Eli, man. I love watching all your stuff. It's so good. I had seen it on TikTok, just on a For You page, and I don't follow people on TikTok. I just kind of scroll through it, and then I saw it then pop up on like Twitter. I'm like, okay, I'll follow you on Twitter. I'm like, why don't I see him on Instagram ever? And I just never looked, and I found it. I was like, oh, there it is. So now we're on all three. But you guys want good MLS content? It's this guy right here. It's fantastic. We love it, and we need more people like that, because that's how the league grows. That's how we get the name out there. And yeah, I would agree. Stay away from Twitter. You get into very bad, stupid arguments.
I'm too much of a nice guy for Twitter, and then I just get the worst sides of me out.
Yeah, well, I'm in the same boat where it's like I try to be nice, and then somebody just says something that gets me, and I don't mind arguing if I've got the data to back it up, as you saw with myself and Mr. Connor over there. But data doesn't work on Twitter, because that means that somebody would have to admit they were wrong, and that doesn't work very well.
Yes.
So, like I said, thanks so much for coming on, Eli. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you are subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, so you know when the next episode goes live, which is an MLS history episode about something. We are so deep into it, we don't even know which ones we're on anymore. Make sure you're following us on all forms of social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. We've got them all, so make sure you are following there so you can see all of our Fun Game Fridays that come out. So we just posted one today for guess the player based off their career path. We do tic-tac-toes, guessing players who played for two clubs. We got a couple other ones that we'll throw out there too. So if that's your type of thing, go follow us there as well. Last minute thoughts, friends. Anybody want to add anything?
No, just Douglas Costa, leave my club.
Connor?
I think I need to get a vendetta guy. That's kind of what I've learned from this episode. Everybody has one, and I don't.
Jake Mulroney, man.
It's yes, DP, you're
but
right.
Jake Mulroney's
right.
up your list, man.
You're right, but Jake Mulroney, it doesn't seem like a bad guy, so it kind of feels harsh to do that.
Yeah, you'll find one eventually. I'm sure Atlanta's right. I mean, you could go Carlos Bocanegra, I guess, for ruining swings and misses, but again, probably not a bad guy either. Yeah, you'll find. We'll get you. But thanks so much again, everybody, for listening in. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Designated Players Podcast. See ya.